That night, New York didn't glow, it blazed. The skyline pulsed like it knew a secret. Inside the studio, the crowd sat frozen, eyes wide, breath held, hearts thudding in unison. No one cracked a joke. No one whispered. Something was coming. They could feel it. It wasn't another talk show. It was a reckoning. And then Karoline Levit stepped into the light. No press badge. No prepared remarks. No filters. She was no longer the White House press secretary. She wasn't a politician. She was a woman on the edge of revelation, clutching something small but explosive, a simple USB drive. Plain. Plastic. But in her grip, it might as well have been a ticking time bomb. She didn't look left. She didn't look right. She looked through the lens, through the audience, into the soul of the night. And at the center of it all, sitting in a black velvet chair like it was a throne, was Oprah Winfrey. Queen of talk. Empress of empathy. Media titan. But tonight? She wasn't the one asking the questions. Tonight, the script was flipped. The empire of narrative was under siege. Oprah crossed her arms slowly, lips forming a smile so tight it almost trembled. Her eyes, once windows into 1,000 tearful interviews, looked tired. And maybe, nervous. The studio host stepped into view. Immaculate. Neutral. Like a referee walking into the middle of a hurricane. He looked around. Took a breath. The crowd shifted. Phones were already recording. Karoline didn't speak. She nodded once, the kind of nod that carried weight. The screen behind her lit up. The air grew heavier. Every eye locked on the glowing screen. Then Levit spoke, her voice low, steady, but sharp enough to cut marble. Gasps. Audible now. The name still scorched. She gestured toward the screen. A line of text glowed like poison. Murmurs rippled through the crowd like waves slamming into the rocks. A few gasps. A few phones lifted higher. The silence shattered. A smattering of applause, half-hearted, uncertain. But Levit wasn't finished. The screen shifted. A young woman. Pale. Composed but barely. Her eyes rimmed red. Her voice firm. The crowd inhaled as one. The temperature dropped. I met Oprah at a film promotion event. She began, her voice tight, trembling, every word like stepping on broken glass. I told her. Harvey tried to force me into a hotel room. Sarah blinked back tears. I begged her to speak out. To help. She looked me in the eye, put her hand on my shoulder, and said, there are bigger things to protect. You could hear a pin drop. Then someone in the audience let out a low, stunned Jesus. Karoline Levit stepped forward, slow, deliberate, her eyes burning holes through the air. She turned to Oprah, not as a politician, not as a press secretary, but as a woman staring down betrayal. She came to you. Desperate. Terrified. She asked for help, and you brushed her off like static. You stood beside a predator, and turned away from a victim. Another, is it true? Oprah sat rigid, gripping the velvet arms of her chair like they might float away. Her lips parted, then closed again. I don't remember that conversation, she said, her voice measured but rattled, a crack in the polished veneer. If that did happen, I would never have told her to stay silent. That is not who I am. This feels like a personal attack. Boos. Cheers. Shouts. The room was no longer neutral, it was a battlefield. Someone else yelled, why didn't you speak out sooner? But it was chaos. Divided. Frenzied. You built your legacy on being a voice for the voiceless. But when one came to you, you chose silence. And the truth, whatever it was no longer between two women. The boos came like thunder, loud, jagged, rolling through the studio in crashing waves. She lifted one hand. Another document flashed onto the screen behind her. Please address the actress complaint promptly, per Ms. Winfrey's request. Levit didn't raise her voice, she didn't need to. Each word hit like a gavel. The studio exploded. The host, still poised, but sweating now, raised his hand for calm. Please, please, he said, voice straining above the roar. Let's maintain order. Miss Levit, these are serious allegations. I must ask, are you absolutely certain of this document's authenticity? I am, she said, calm and cutting. All documents I present tonight are from vetted sources. They'll be available to the public. But Sarah and others have waited long enough. And this, she added, is the beginning. Someone in the audience shouted, "This is a smear campaign." The room fractured again. Studio lights glared. Camera bulbs flashed. Media outlets scrambled online, conservative circles hailing Levit a truth-bearer, liberal commentators branding her a political opportunist wrapped in moral outrage. Karoline stood unshaken beneath the blinding lights, her right hand gripping that tiny USB like it held the soul of the night. Her voice no longer spoke, it carved. Haunted. He turned to Levit. Karoline nodded once. Cold. Controlled. No flair. No triumph. Just purpose. And then came the pivot, the kind that knocks the air out of a room. Silence. So thick it became sound. At least, that was the promise. She paused. Let the photo linger. Let the beauty sting. Phones lowered. Gasps halted. Even the skeptics leaned in. No one breathed. In 2007, a dorm matron, Emily Rivera, was accused of sexually abusing multiple students under Oprah's care. Oprah flew down. She apologized. She cried. She promised to fix it. But what did she actually do? Then, without a word, Karoline raised her hand. A video began. Her voice trembled, but something inside it burned. The crowd leaned in. The matron, Emily, targeted me. And others. We told the staff. We believed Oprah would help us. She came. She spoke. She apologized. Her voice cracked like glass under a boot. Sarah blinked, holding back a tide. Then she whispered, barely audible, yet piercing. The audience gasped. One man covered his mouth. A woman shook her head, eyes filling. A nervous whisper swept the rows like dry leaves in wind. You knew, Oprah. They came to you. Begged you. And you had the power to act. But instead, you hired lawyers. You made calls. You protected your image, while those girls were left in the dark. Others booed. Some still clapped in blind support. But the tide had turned. The air was crackling. Not with serenity this time, but with fire behind her eyes and a tremble in her voice. Applause burst out. Small, defiant. Another signal. Another shift. A document. Gasps again. Even louder. This shows you didn't apologize. You paid to make the case disappear. You buried the story, to protect a brand. A woman in the front row stood, shouting, Why did you do it, Oprah? It was chaos. Fire and fracture. That document is misrepresented, she snapped. We acted within the law. I did what I had to do to keep those girls safe. Karoline remained still. Like marble. Her voice was quiet, but it sliced like frost. The crowd erupted again. Cries of justice for Sarah collided with protests. Tears fell. Voices cracked. Phones shook in trembling hands. Miss Levit, he said, his voice low, struggling to steady the moment. These are grave accusations. Can you stand by every claim? Every document. Every file. Every word. Verified. And they'll be released publicly. But victims like Sarah, they can't wait any longer. None of them can. Then, a final blow. A ripple of shock. Eyes widened. Heads turned. The air was suffocating now, too dense to breathe. Not a soul stirred. The host, voice nearly a whisper now, swallowed hard. And everyone waited. Karoline Levit drew a breath, not nervous, not unsure, but as if pulling in the storm before she unleashed it. And she said one word. The name dropped like a stone in still water. Ashley Ward Faria. Levit continued, her voice low, surgical. The so-called healer you introduced to millions. The screen came alive. He has helped thousands find hope again, she said, her voice rich with conviction. A healing energy I've never seen anywhere else. Levit let the silence bloom. The clip had done the heavy lifting. She signaled again. A woman appeared. Mid-40s, lined face, tired eyes, but voice strong, defiant. The room dropped into absolute silence. Her voice cracked. Her shoulders stiffened. Gasps. Hands over mouths. Someone sobbed quietly. A man near the back shouted, "Oprah, why?" Kimberly was one of hundreds. Hundreds who followed your endorsement, your praise, your platform. And when the truth came out, you said nothing. Why didn't you speak? But others clapped still, holding the line, holding the image. I introduced Ashley because I believed in his work. At the time, she said, her voice trembling. When the allegations emerged, I stepped away. But I am not responsible for what he did. The screen shifted again. Own LLC 2011. Wire transfer record from a Ashley-affiliated institute. You didn't promote him. You accepted money. Your network received funds from his organization after you praised him to the world. Oprah's jaw tightened. Her voice shot back, sharp and raw. Applause. But weaker now, drowned under the roar of outrage. You built your empire on trust. On truth. But Kimberly paid for that illusion. Others did too. The screen changed again. This time, a quiet, damning quote. From an interview with Oprah's aunt, 2013. You sold a narrative, crafted a mythology, to sell books, to sell redemption. While real people like Kimberly trusted you and were destroyed. The host jumped in, voice strained, eyes darting between the two women like he was watching a knife fight unfold. Karoline didn't blink. She nodded. She turned to the audience, her final words like thunder before the storm breaks, and once again she paused. And we're still not finished. Then her eyes settled. Right on Oprah. There's one last name we haven't said yet. Margaret. Karoline stepped toward the screen, her fingers sweeping the panel. Confidential, PR strategy / studio concerns. Margaret narrative, we need to keep Margaret off message. Oprah will manage it. This, Karoline said, her voice cool and steady, isn't about bad blood between artists. It's about how power is used to erase people who won't comply. Margaret starred in Precious. She gave the performance of her life. She won an Oscar. But when she refused to travel the world for free to promote the film, the screen changed again, this time to a video clip. I told Oprah I had a family, a talk show. I was working. I wasn't going to fly to Europe and promote a film I'd already done for free. The camera panned the studio. Others looked away. Karoline faced Oprah again, her voice sharp, unrelenting. The crowd roared, fractured. Shouts from every side. She deserved better. Still, some clapped slower now. More tentative. But loyal. I championed Precious because I believed in the story. Margaret made her own choices. I never told anyone to blacklist her. Karoline didn't back down. She stepped aside and tapped again. Margaret's personality is problematic. Proceed without her. The audience hushed. There it was. Karoline stepped forward, not for applause, not for theater, but with the final, unshakable line. The silence in the studio now wasn't from shock, it was from realization. The host cleared his throat, trying to steady his voice, his expression unreadable. Karoline didn't hesitate. She looked back at the crowd. She nodded toward the screen. No cheers. No jeers. Just a silence. The curtain hadn't closed, only lifted. This isn't conjecture, she said, sharp and commanding. You called Margaret trouble. And Hollywood took the cue. You didn't fund films, you decided who lived or died in the industry. A few gasped. Others groaned. Someone shouted from the balcony, "Why, Oprah?" Across the stage, Oprah stood suddenly, flushed, furious. A burst of applause came from a pocket of loyal supporters. The tide was turning. "This wasn't about one actress," she said. "You shaped Hollywood. You lit the spotlight and you pulled the plug when it didn't suit you." A list appeared. Names. The studio audience murmured, tension rising again. "Karoline," he said, a bit breathless, "you're suggesting that Oprah Winfrey, one of the most celebrated figures in entertainment, controlled who worked and who didn't?" Levit met his gaze without blinking. She turned back to the audience, her voice quieter now, but no less firm. The crowd was divided. Some were leaning forward, captivated. Others leaned back, uncertain. The air was a coil wound too tight. Across from her, Oprah sat rigid. Her shoulders stiff, her jaw locked. Her grip on the velvet armrests white-knuckled. Her face composed, but her eyes burned. "Karoline, what else do you have?" And then she said it. The room froze. She pressed the button. A voice. Smooth. Familiar. Undeniable. "We need to keep Harvey stable. If this gets out, the whole project falls apart." Shouts rang out from every direction. Phones flew into the air. "That's her voice," someone yelled. "That recording was made in 2013, she said, her voice rising above the rising swell. "It's a private conversation between Oprah and a close associate regarding Weinstein." She didn't know. She worked to suppress it. Some people shouted in anger, standing to their feet. A man shouted, "Oprah, how could you?" Oprah leapt up, her face ghost white, her voice shaking with fury. Her words landed. Her fans clapped again, but not like before. And beneath it, boos. Karoline didn't so much as blink. She took one final step forward, into the light. Her words now a solemn verdict. The host couldn't speak. The crowd wouldn't stop. Karoline's words swept through the studio like a tempest, tearing down the final walls of doubt. Silence was no longer an option. Phones lit up like fireworks, raised in every direction. Cries of "justice for the victims" battled with defiant chants of "We love you, Oprah." Moments later, a man roared, "Karoline's right. We've been blind." Stripped of her carefully curated calm, she stepped forward, fire in her eyes, hand raised like a gavel of judgment. The audience fractured. The host tried to intervene, his voice fraying at the edges. "Everyone, please, we need calm. Oprah, do you have anything else you'd like to say?" Oprah turned, her face locked in fury. She didn't respond, didn't glance back. Her heels clicked sharply across the stage floor as she walked off into the wings, out of sight, out of control. Karoline didn't move. She stepped forward, her eyes fixed on the path Oprah had taken, then turned to the audience. "She may have left the stage," she said. But the truth didn't. A surge of applause. Shouts of support. Cameras zoomed in. The host looked shell-shocked. His collar was damp with sweat, his grip on the microphone trembling. But he tried to stay on script. Karoline didn't hesitate. She turned to the camera, directly to the world. Thunderous applause. The room felt like it was shaking. Oprah's exit was a rupture. But it wasn't the end. It was the start. We thank Karoline Levit for this extraordinary appearance. This will be one for the books. Good night, everyone." No one moved. Outside the studio, the digital world had caught fire. Social media exploded with hashtags. Hashtag Karoline Levit exposes Hollywood. One tweet surged to the top of trending, but it wasn't one-sided. Conservative outlets hailed Levit as a truth-teller. Liberal commentators bristled. The online war had begun. Karoline sat alone in a plastic chair, the walls humming with distant stage lights and muted shouting. The USB still gripped tightly in her hand, like a relic or a grenade. She didn't check them. Sarah, Kimberly, Margaret. That brief swell of pride in her chest was quickly buried beneath the pressure. The weight of what she'd done. And what would come next. An assistant rushed in, face pale, voice tight. "Karoline," the aide whispered urgently, cracking the tension in the quiet dressing room. "Reporters are swarming the gates. They're demanding your comment." And outside, the world was already on fire. A respected independent journalist posted a cryptic thread. The post exploded, fueling thousands of reposts and replies. Doubt was spreading like ink in water. Levit is a wrecking ball with a USB. Karoline read the first few lines of vitriol before shutting off her phone. The words clung to her like smoke. Then came Oprah. I've spent my life amplifying the unheard, uplifting the broken, and telling stories that matter. Today's allegations are designed to erase that work. But they won't define me. I know who I am. OWN's viewership began to dip. Quietly, 2 sponsors paused campaigns. Several advocacy groups posted thank yous, not to Oprah, but to Levit. The ground beneath Oprah was shifting. You've kicked a hornet's nest, one advisor muttered, flipping through printouts of headlines. They're digging. College essays. Old tweets. Family. You need to brace yourself. This wasn't about me, she said. It's never been about me. But one anonymous message stopped her mid-scroll. That line held her together more than any press victory ever could. The up-close segment was uploaded to YouTube. Within 12 hours, it racked up 42 million views. The comment section turned into a civil war. This was an ambush. Oprah's the one who's been betrayed. And yet, something had shifted. The next morning, the White House press room filled to bursting. She inhaled. I'm not here today to claim victory, she began, her voice deliberate, each word weighted. This isn't about headlines or careers. It's about truth. About evidence. About the victims who've been waiting in the shadows. We presented facts, she continued. Harvey Weinstein. The South Africa School. Ashley Dedeus. Margaret. Not rumors, receipts. You don't have to believe me. Just look at the data. Listen to the voices. All of it is available. For the public. For the press. For the courts if necessary. Because justice can only begin with transparency. Karoline Levit, The Reckoner, Truth versus Legacy, America's new civil war of icons, but the woman who had dared speak the unspeakable. A storm still swelling. Praise and condemnation poured in at equal volume. One moment, she was a hero. The next, a target. And yet, she stood by her choice. She had spoken for them. Crushing pressure. Doubt. Sleepless nights. Isolation. And so, the lesson lingers like smoke after fire. Truth-telling demands preparation. Steel. Sobriety. Because the moment you stand against power, power stands against you. But her story also reveals the cost. And perhaps more importantly, do we have the wisdom to listen? The truth. Not the most viral voice. Not the most powerful name. But truth, difficult, messy, and often hidden between outrage and idolization. So be bold, but also be wise. Be loud, but remain grounded. Because truth isn't a finish line. It's a road you walk, step by step, storm after storm. Thank you for joining us on this journey through revelation, reaction, and reckoning. If you believe truth matters, subscribe, share, and speak up. The next story is coming. And the next storm will need you.